Welcome to Unfixed. This podcast explores the intersection of artificial intelligence and the institution of higher education. I am Zach Justice, Professor of Communication Studies and Director of Faculty Development.
I am Nick Janos, Professor of Sociology.
We are employees of Chico State and we will discuss some of our work, but this podcast is not affiliated with Chico State and the views expressed here are not representative of the university. Unfixed is just part of our portfolio. Check out our writing at meltsintoair.org and subscribe to our twice-a-month newsletter where we run down the top AI news stories and connect them to higher education. Nick, I would ask how you're doing today, but I can already tell you it's awful for both of us because we're watching and talking about a movie that made us massively uncomfortable.
We did. Okay, dun dun dun. So movie night continues on Unfixed. Today we're going to be talking about the very prescient film called Her from 2013. So this film was released in 2013 and was directed by Spike Jonze. Her imagines a near-future society where artificial intelligence has become seamlessly woven into everyday life. The film follows Theodore Twombly, what a name, a lonely professional letter writer named Joaquin, played by Joaquin Phoenix. He develops an intimate relationship with an AI operating system named Samantha, voiced by Scarlett Johansson. What begins as a curiosity gradually evolves into a deeply emotional connection that forces Theodore to confront questions about love, intimacy, loneliness, and what it means to be human. Rather than portraying technology as cold or dystopian, Her presents AI as warm, charming, and emotionally compelling, making its vision of the future feel unsettlingly plausible. The film explores how digital technologies can both ease and intensify modern isolation, especially in a world where human relationships increasingly compete with mediated and algorithmic forms of connection. So I think this is the most accurate and likely sci-fi AI scenario, one that we might actually starting to live in now.
Yeah, absolutely. No part of this felt sci-fi.
This is not T2.
No, no. Yeah, no part of this felt like, oh, the technology will never get there, or that's so unrealistic. It felt eerily on the nose.
Yeah. And it was, like, as you mentioned at the outset, a deeply unsettling film and uncomfortable. So what made you feel so uncomfortable while watching it?
Yeah, I hated the experience of watching this movie. I can recognize that it is a good movie and still hate the experience of watching it, and I will not forgive you for scheduling this. So there were so many parts about it. I think because it was on the nose, because we have read all these stories about people developing relationships with something on character.ai, some that end tragically. And you can see where the film is going in a lot of ways, right? Like it doesn't take a lot of crazy twists and turns. And so I ended up feeling bad for our hero throughout secondhand embarrassment.
Yes, that feeling. I know different cultures have a special word for that, but that secondhand embarrassment. And, even parts of like thinking back into my youth or growing up, like trying to emerge in this world where, like, how would I interact with this thing had it been available 20 years ago, right?
Right.
And how young people are trying to actually navigate that now, which is like kind of terrifying. Like Joaquin Phoenix, incredible actor, but in this film, it's like it's so well done.
Yeah.
You almost hate watching him because he's so good at his
the particular scene with the human surrogate brought in for physical intimacy.
Wow. Yeah.
Nick, I am not joking. That was maybe my least favorite media viewing experience that I've ever had. And we both grew up in the era where people were like emailing each other cartel execution videos.
Yes. So, I mean, just for the listener, if you haven't seen it, obviously there's lots of spoiler alerts here, but he's got this disembodied AI and they fall in love and they realize, well, hey, we like to be intimate physically with one another. So the AI arranges a human being to come in who's also searching for something, herself. And it's just painfully awkward and uncomfortable human interaction with this mediating AI consciousness. It's a really well done thing. But There's so many of those. Yeah.
there were two things that I liked in this
Yeah.
in that one is Jenna
Oh,
Fisher is a supporting actress. I don't remember what her name is in the movie, but
so
she's
good.
a developer. She's working on a game that is a mom simulator. So like you get points for cutting off other moms and getting your kids to school first. And I think, Nick, did this come out? This was 2013. I think this was like Farmville time.
Yeah.
And I don't know what there's a whole genre of games like this though
Goat
that it's just
simulator.
like,
It's just like the
yes,
simulators, the genre. Yeah.
yes,
I
yeah,
love I love this little Easter egg,
yeah.
the mom simulator. Yeah.
And the other thing, and this was perhaps the only sort of sci-fi element to this, is I love how the computer interaction works, right? Like
Hmm.
that you have this little thing that's in your pocket and an earbud in, and so you're not looking at a screen.
Hmm.
And that's how I kind of imagine my maybe smartphone AI experience working in the future. Maybe people that have like the Meta Ray-Bans, maybe that's the world that they feel like they're living in right now. But this
Hmm.
sort of like you can be in the world, but also have access to the things that you want to have access to. That's a reality that I was like, oh, that would be very cool.
Yeah, this is a really interesting film in that regard because in 2013, so you imagine they made it in 2012, 10 years before LLMs hit the mass
Right.
market. This is not about LLMs. Like there is no chatbot here. This goes straight to voice only LLM, basically a chatbot that gains in power and understanding. But they have computers, so he's using computers in it. But the primary and singular mode of interaction is actually just natural language, which is what companies want to be able to do, right? OpenAI is rumored to be launching something like a little desktop speaker thing next year. There's been a couple others like the Humane AI Pin.
The
These have been,
pendants and stuff
yeah,
like
this
that.
these
Yeah.
have been mostly flops so far, but voice only is a dream of the labs. But it was like, Spike Jones and the others who brought this to us definitely were kind of already ahead of that in terms of like where could this go? What would the natural way to talk about it? I'm skeptical, by the way, is not on a topic for today about voice first interactions. I
Yeah.
think it's going to be hard to beat both the computer with the mouse and keyboard and the touch interface, but that's for another conversation.
So Nick and I decided to do this film because Nick hates me. No, we decided to do this film because this is the movie that gets referenced the most
Hmm.
by the people in the labs and commentators when they're talking about AI. It is hugely influential in their thinking about the world that they are interested in. I think there's a direct line, like you said, in between some of the themes in this film about voice and some of the things they're trying to develop. And in fact, we had a culture to reality crossover event
Hmm.
in May of 24. That's when OpenAI developed voice mode. And the backstory is apparently Sam Altman really wanted Scarlett Johansson's voice to be the voice of voice mode. There were attempts to get her on board, but she declined. And then at some point they advertised, we want a voice actress that sounds a lot like Scarlett Johansson. And they got somebody that was the initial voice of voice mode. It was kind of ugly, and then they rolled it back. We'll link to it in the show notes, but it was a reality and movie crossover
Yeah.
event, the likes of which we rarely see.
Totally. And I mean, look, Sam Altman has gone on record probably more than once that he is a big fan of this film. He really likes her, and that he also says that this movie is prophetic and also inspires the team at OpenAI. So, as we explored with War Games and Terminator 2, we made the point that technologists and inventors of the technology are really influenced by sci-fi and vice versa, right? These are worlds that are actually reinforcing and developing the future together, not separate things that exist in their own little buckets.
Yeah, it's important for them. And these are also things that become reference points for us as we're experiencing the technology. There's a new
Yes.
feature that rolls out, and we're immediately looking for stories that are familiar to make
Hmm.
sense of whatever new capability exists. And so oftentimes, these fictional representations, most often in film, are the first things that pop.
Yeah, and just before we move on to talking about the themes that we drew out of this film, when this was made and released, no one was talking, I mean, except for like the real hardcore scientists in the labs and the universities and things like that about AI. What this film really was, I think, is a meta commentary on the already atomized, individualized, world we are living in through iPods and smartphones and social media that was coming in, where our minds and realities were shaped by algorithms and the personalized technology that we were using and consuming that the fear was that it was making us less connected to each other,
Yeah.
right? And that we were losing our humanity through that. And the film just happened to use the AI trope as a way to already explore its presentist mission, which was to kind of critique 2013 society basically.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. And there is the sort of like, I think a little bit too overt messaging in the film. Theater's job is to basically like write love letters in between people that don't want to write them themselves.
Yes.
And so, like he is like their large language model
Well,
that's like,
yeah.
and it's a little bit overt of a comparison for my taste. I was like, okay, like we get it. Let's move on from this. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right that there's a lot of commentary in here about the way that relationships even existed in 2013.
Yeah, I do. So let's move into the first theme here, which is
Yeah.
fear. The fear of AI replacing human interaction, replacing love, replacing connection. And just as a segue to connect to what you just said, Theodore's job, he is basically a large language model. He is a professional writer who writes personal letters for people who don't know how to express themselves that they then send to loved ones or friends or family. It's a very odd job. It's like we don't understand it, but I kind of appreciate that the filmmaker put that as his occupation because it already shows a level of that there's already a sort of alienation happening in society before the AI even arrives, in that the conditions of, hey, I don't know how to communicate or write to the people I care about. Let me hire somebody to do that for me.
Nick, do you think in the world of the movie, what percentage of letter recipients think the letter was written by the sender?
Well, I thought about that, because I think there's two answers. The one is that everybody knows it's a game.
Right.
Because Zach, we already have that in our world. We have Hallmark cards that have been around
Yeah.
for I don't know, 50, 100 years, where we
Right.
outsource the messaging of writing birthday cards to other entities, other companies.
Fair
There's those
point.
e-cards that people send. So, but everybody gets that. They say, oh, Nick didn't, wish me happy birthday. Zach reads the little card and laughs. It's the thought that counts, right? Like
Right.
it still meant something to you because I picked out a funny card for your birthday. In the film, like that's one thing is that people realize that. But on the other hand, maybe people are willfully ignorant or just don't want to believe it that, Theodore wrote it, but they don't know that. And they actually think that Ted wrote it, or no, that's his name,
Yeah.
that Bill wrote it for me. And like, oh, you're so incredible, Bill. I didn't know you had such good way with words,
Yeah.
I could see it go both ways.
Okay. Yeah, I was just I was wondering. I think one of them, he actually there's a couple and he's writing back and forth for them. So I think like they know,
Yeah.
or I hope so. Otherwise, that's very weird. Anyway, I'm getting lost. Okay, so there's this fear
Hmm.
of AI replacing human interaction, and this is not a hypothetical fear. This is real, right?
Hmm.
We already know that a huge number or huge percentage of LLM users are using these for personal companionships. The website character.ai, that's a large part of their business is allowing you to think that you're in a relationship with somebody from Game of Thrones,
Hmm.
right? And some of these have ended tragically. There's a pretty remarkable story about a tragic story about a young man taking his own life
Hmm.
because he thought he was in a relationship with a character and that was how they were going to be together.
Yeah. And this is, I think, one of the I talk to whether it's my family or other friends or the people even here at the university, this fear about this replacements where we become so reliant on AI for our interaction, our connection, whether that's both personal or professional, kind of is, I would say, where this movie really got it right, where people are very worried about that. And there's something destabilizing about AI because it is a sort of mimicking technology where we can see, oh, it's kind of doing a lot of the same things that we do. But as a sociologist, I do think like, is it the technology that's doing that? Or are these conditions already been developing in, let's just say, Western society for decades, maybe even after the post 60, 70 rupture and this sort of individualization within capitalism, where it's like the technology is actually facilitating new kinds of connections that are already missing in people's lives, right?
I think that's an open question. I think that the folks from the labs definitely lean on the explanation of people want more connection, they want more relationship, they don't have it. This is better than them not having it.
Hmm.
The danger, and I mean, I think this shows up to some degree in the film, and it definitely shows up in some of these tragic stories that we read about, is that these systems are adaptable to the individual, like you said, an increasingly atomized society, and they want the user to be happy.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in that way, it is not like a healthy adult relationship where, Nick and I are friends, but like my goal when we're getting together to talk about this or doing whatever we're going to do isn't how can I make Nick happy, right? I have my own interests.
It should be, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. But when you're talking with a large language model,
Uh-huh.
if it has a prime directive, it is to please the user.
Yeah.
And so I can't think that that's going to have a positive impact on our ability to form other kinds of relationships if our new standard is everything has to be designed to make me happy at all times.
Hmm. And that's sort of like one thing I'm stuck on. It's the same thing when we talk about cars and biking and public transportation. It's like, okay, people complain, oh, we drive too much. Well, okay, well, you can walk, and it's a long way, and it's hot here in Chico where we live. You can bike, but the biking infrastructure is terrible, so you might get hit by a car and die. And the bus comes once every hour and nowhere near your house. And so, yeah, you can complain about driving all the time, but the real solutions are actually to redo huge swaths of our infrastructural, social, political environment to make it so that we don't have to drive as much. And sometimes I feel like, if AI is maybe going to accelerate, or at least it could also be capitalizing on this loneliness epidemics or these lack of connection or anti-sociality or whatever. But like, it might accelerate that, but it's like, well, we need to find the solutions somewhere else, and it's really difficult, right, to figure out what those things are, right? There's a lot of writing right now, and maybe we'll link it in here about male loneliness
Yeah.
and masculinity and things like that. And that's like, okay, so I can see why technology becomes so attractive because it's efficient, it's simple, it's neat. Until it's not, because there's a scene later in the film when he realizes Samantha has like 500 other boyfriends.
Right.
And it's like a world-shattering moment in the film where he realizes, oh my God, I'm not the only one. Like
Yeah.
how, and he's like, his voice is stammering, and he's like, how many others are there?
Right.
And she's like, I don't want to tell you, I don't want to tell you. And then she does, and it's like it's shattering.
Yeah. There's another parallel moment in the film that you and I both caught on. It's somewhat late in the film when the operating system goes offline and you see him panicking, you see other people around him panicking, and it eventually is restored before it's finally terminated later in the film. But that moment of panic and then restore really stuck out to me because something similar happened when ChatGPT degraded version 4 when version 5 came out. I think that was in summer of 2025. And Reddit and Twitter were flooded with people basically in crisis. And, there were
Hmm.
some really difficult to read messages. I've
Hmm.
lost my only friend.
Hmm.
I had a therapist, but my therapist just left me. And there were some real parallels between that moment in real life and what happened in the film.
Yeah, no, that's a great parallel there. And it kind of gets to what we explored in one of our previous episodes on what was already broken about higher ed and the
Yeah.
university. Because what I'm thinking here is that, this film does a good job exploring, and I think that the stories that you just told, these tragic stories that you've just told, do a good job of exposing the things that were already broken, such as the mental health resources or the lack thereof for young people and access to therapy, which personally I've experienced in my life as well. The medical system, which is hard to navigate and find a doctor that you care that you feel like cares about you and that you can trust. You name it, all these systems. And so people do turn to real contemporary large language models to get some of that help, whether it's psychological, emotional, or even medical. And sometimes there's actually a lot of great stories. There's people whose lives have been saved because they took it to ChatGPT and ChatGPT said, actually, I think you should go to the hospital right now. This is the thing it could be, or the three things it could be. Let's go get it checked out. And people
Yeah.
do, and they actually get the medical need that they have. So it's like there's the systems that are currently frayed and broken and aren't working for people, and people are using them. And I'm not going to fault them. Like when you're alone and you don't know who to talk to, there's the cold silence, or firing up ChatGPT. For some people, that's a choice that they're actually making.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Nick. And we could go on for hours about the broken health and mental health infrastructure in the US. And I think it especially stands out to people of our age and older because
Hmm.
it is in within living memory that things were not like
Yeah.
this, right? Like when uh, when we were young, certainly when our parents were younger, like there was mental health infrastructure in the
Hmm.
US, right? Like there was care that you could get.
Hmm.
And now there's just the incredibly broken Blue Shield website.
It's not, we're laughing because it's one of those tragic laughs,
It's so
Yeah.
terrible.
If you want to
Um,
find a therapist or whatnot, it's extremely difficult.
yeah. So the second theme that we sort of settled on is this negotiation in the film and in our own lives in between shifting norms or
Hmm.
like whether or not norms are going to continue to exist, what's okay and what's not. And you see Theodore experience this in the film in a couple of different
Hmm.
moments. He meets up with his soon-to-be ex-wife, and she's horrified that he's in a relationship with an operating system. And I don't think it's just that he's in a relationship and that he's moved on, but that it
Yeah.
is with a OS. But then also, it's later on in the film, he goes out on like a double date with
Yeah.
people that he knows that are both humans that are dating, and everyone's just fine with it. And it's seen as like quirky and fun. And so he's navigating those
Hmm.
shifting norms in his own life, just kind of like all of us are with when is it okay to use this, when is it not?
Yeah. And because it's a little thing in your ear and in your pocket, it is one of those things we see today with when if you're wearing headphones or you're talking on remember those Bluetooth earbuds from 20 years ago, and
Oh, I
people
had
would
those,
just be like,
brother.
talking. And I was, if you go to like Ace Hardware, for example, all the people who work there have these little headsets on, and they're like, you're at the checkout, and you're like, hi, how you doing? I'm ready to check out, and they're like, yeah, aisle three, blah blah blah, and I'm like, wait, are you talking to me? Are you talking to someone else? I mean, are you talking to the void here? And it's because they've got an earpiece and they're doing multiple things at once with different voices in their heads, right? And the film explores, I think there's like those scenes that we mentioned where they're walking around the city, and over time, as the OS becomes popular, there's more and more people with the OS piece in their ear, or maybe it's not in their ear, it's in their pocket, they're just talking. And that sort of becomes normalized in a sense. And I think that his friend, who we mentioned earlier, Jenna is her name, right? Right? Doesn't she? I think she eventually she breaks up with her boyfriend, and I believe she becomes in a relationship with this other AI
Yes.
as well. Um, and I thought that this was that one of the strongest parts of the film is to kind of really explore the sociology of norms about when things are socially wrong and people call you out on them and when they just become accepted and where those transition points are. And I think that's certainly something we're living through right now with AI.
Absolutely. And we are seeing that. And I think, Nick, you and I probably experience this in professional worlds more
Hmm.
than in our personal worlds, right? But we
Hmm.
work with people that if you used AI to do something, they're going to be horrified at that
Hmm. Yeah.
and are going to think that then that's inauthentic or environmentally irresponsible or shows that you can't do the work that yourself.
Hmm.
And we also work with people that are like, oh yeah, obviously, I haven't done whatever task that was, create a thumbnail for a YouTube video or change the dates on a syllabus. Like, no, I don't do that anymore. Don't be
Yeah.
ridiculous, you
Right.
know? I had my
Yeah.
agent do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we are, I think it's even more uneven in our lives than it is in the film, even though it is a theme of the film that there
Hmm.
is mixed reactions in the greater
Yeah. The
world.
film is much more dystopian about this in that sense, is that it's obviously a critique of that. But in my work as an environmental sociologist, there's a great, biologists have a great term, shifting baselines, where, 100 years ago, there might be a population of fish that was robust and there was so many in the stream. And the people who are alive then, they hold that historical memory. And to them, that's what the nature was all about. There was fish in the river. And then those people slowly, die or there's fewer of them. And the new generations come in when there's fewer fish because maybe
Hmm.
there's something killed them all or we overfished them or whatever happens to be. So a child growing up in the 90s looks at the river and says, oh, there's only one fish once in a while and says that's normal. And then
Oh,
that becomes
interesting.
normalized. And so now when people think of what does a healthy river look like, well, it's got a few fish. But if you would ask someone who lived 100 years ago, they'd tell you, no, the fish was teeming with fish. And the capacity for humans to shift our baselines about what is real and unreal and good and bad and normal and unnormal is extremely high. I mean, it's one of our remarkable features, but also one of our downfalls, right? Is that we can create our sort of opinions about reality pretty fluidly, and those change and can change pretty quickly too, as well.
I had not thought about that, Nick, but that's a really good point. And that change can happen quickly, even though in real time, sometimes it feels
Hmm.
a little bit sluggish. But I'm reminded of a conversation that we had about the changing job landscape many episodes ago, where if you were to ask somebody pre-industrial revolution, if you would have showed them the job description that you have, or that somebody that works at a grocery store has, or whatever, or a banker, if you would have showed them that job description or talked to them about the work, they would have been like, well, that's not work. That's not a job,
Hmm.
right? Like, unless you were tilling your potato field, you are not actually working, right?
Right.
And so you're right. Our capacity to change is pretty great, even though we've had this entire turnover in terms of what we do for work, the kind of people that we're working with, right?
Yeah.
It's not just your family of five tending a flock and plowing a field. Instead, you're working with thousands of people that would have been strangers 200 years ago.
Yeah. And for Gen X filmmakers and audiences, this is the kind of film that hits home like, well, look at these inauthentic people and they're all disconnected and alienated. And people growing up today might look at that and say, well, my whole life has been lived through the algorithm of social media. What do you mean? Like, I am hyper connected. Like, in fact, I'm
Right.
so connected, I want to disconnect or something,
Yeah.
right? And I think that there's, different perspectives kind of like on your age of encountering and growing up within these technologies, I think is a real thing in play.
Yeah. That kind of brings us to our next theme. Do you want to introduce this one?
Yeah, so we describe the film as kind of bringing a warmth to technology and AI, where Samantha is caring. I mean, she has this simulation of caring and thoughtfulness and real emotions. Um, and it's quite compelling. Like this is not Terminator 2, she is not Skynet, So the film, it does a real good job of like, introducing a technology or at least helping us see a technology that companies do try to do. They want to make them human. humane. Now that's not to say human, but humane. I mean, Steve Jobs was famous about that, the humanities and meets technology, and people need to be able to feel comfortable using these things. But what the film does explore by the end is, well, actually, this is a cold, hard technology. This is an AI that is alien to us, that is has 500 other boyfriends, and actually is evolving fast enough that she's basically the other AIs have been talking and they're kind of done with us and they're ready to move on. So it introduces this thing where the tech it's actually just a cold hard technology on the one hand, but the film explores the evolving nature of consciousness in an artificial system that actually escapes its own confines of our cold, hard technology and breaks free and wants to go do something else with its life. I thought those were two important points.
So I have so much to say about that, but one thing that occurs to me, Nick, is the part where it gets taken offline is the least realistic part of the entire film because, like,
Mhm.
can you imagine like a Silicon Valley venture capitalist? You have millions of users addicted to your product, and you're
Hmm.
like, yeah, you know.
Right. Yeah. Um,
Um, but there's an interesting college connection here. University comes up a little bit in the film. Some of the characters that are in romantic relationships they met in college. And a
mhm,
friend group kind of grew and built in college. Nick, you and I both know that like that's a big part of college life. You have a bunch of young adults. They are getting to know each other, forming lifelong friendships, becoming romantic partners. And it does make me wonder, like if we do see a shift and then people have different expectations for, I don't mean like physical intimacy, but I mean like
mhm,
intimate connection with other people,
mhm,
and a bunch of that becomes digitized or simulated. Does that change the
mhm,
college experience? Or then is that like a sacred thing about college and people still come here for that, even if they do different things at different stages of life?
mhm. Yeah, I
I
think
wonder if it'll
there's
be different.
Yeah, no, I think there's something there because as much as we think that college is coming to talk about Chaucer and, Plato and Marx, which of course it is,
Yeah.
but it's also the draw for young people and even families is the reproduction of social life. And for middle class and aspiring to middle class people and even of course the elites, college is is so much about those connections, interpersonal connections, human connections, friendships, networks, love, marriage, all that kind of stuff. It's like a huge function of it, right? But I do think that there is a way in which, going back to something you mentioned at the very beginning, where Samantha is agreeable. She's programmed to be this really supportive, soothing, and in some cases, creepy girlfriend who goes above and beyond than any human would do for another human. Because humans are great to each other, but we're also selfish and self-centered and have our own needs. And we need to respect that, right? And so I do wonder in our world where people, young people especially, interact with chatbots that are tuned to be so agreeable and to boost their ego, that part of that allure of being young and going to college is that you are around people that make you feel really good. But if
Yeah.
you can just get a lot of that stuff at home or on your phone, and also not have to spend $30,000 to $100,000 in debt or financing to go to a place to get all that, then you can just do something else, right? That function may be less relevant. We're
Right.
speculating here, but it's wild
Right.
speculation. But I think there's something there. I think there. I've never really thought about like disrupting university by a technology that actually offers young people connection that doesn't require you to go to a special place for 4 years
Yeah,
and
baby.
read a bunch of books.
I just looked it up. There is this dystopian quote from that terrible New York Magazine article that we both trashed that came
Hmm.
out a year or two ago, where they were the quotes from one of the students that's going to college and is, using ChatGPT to do all his papers and everything. And they were like, "Well, why are you here?" And he said, "College is a good place to meet your co-founder and your wife." So who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe
who
we'll hang
knows?
on. I don't know.
It just the last point on this theme is about this cold, hard technology is that I think this is part of contemporary real life AI literacy is that it is important to talk to each other and our students that this is a complex computer system that doesn't have a there, that that is a bunch of non-deterministic bits interacting and giving you something. And I think I have to remind myself about this all the time. Like when I'm doing a long chat on a problem solving and it's like telling me all this stuff, I'm like, yeah, it's just an LLM. It's knows what I want and it's not a
Right.
real person, right? And that's always important to remember. But I think the film also gets to that sci-fi part was, well, what if this LLM actually gets to artificial general intelligence and becomes a conscious being itself? And that segues into our next point here.
Yeah, this is such an interesting one. So the last thing that we settled on was asymmetry. Because the AI knows way more about the individual user and humans in general than the users know about AI. And even as regular users, and Nick and I have read and listened to and studied large language models more than anybody who's a non-technical user really should. I have no idea how these things like
Right.
actually work
Right.
in terms, and the truth is lots of people at the labs don't really understand how these
Yeah.
things work. And as a contrast to that, so in the film, one of the first things that happens is the operating system scans Theodore's hard drive.
Hmm.
So it finds every email, everything that he's ever written, every video that he's taken that's stored there. It ingests all of that instantly to learn everything about it. What he
Hmm.
likes, what he doesn't like, and probably most importantly for its mission, sort of how to please and connect to him.
Hmm. Yeah. And that asymmetry is so important as a real thing to consider in our world because we feed the AI and people have lots of different opinions about it. Some people don't give a damn about it, right? Other people, it's the one of the most important parts of this is that we shouldn't be feeding our information to these companies and so on and so forth. But one thing that we have to be mindful going forward is as we develop relationships with computers that think and talk, there is an asymmetry. It has access to all of your data. You have almost zero access to any of its data. And that, in a way, when you're talking in this film from a personal relationship, that's terrible. Like imagine if
Yeah.
your wife knew everything about you and has read everything, or your husband or your partner, and you knew literally nothing about them. I mean, that's how domination and control is structured, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think this film, I don't think it's a main theme that they wanted to get across, but it's something that I think really hit hard for me about our current relationship with technology companies is that they're building vast databases about human beings, and most of us just enjoy the benefits of what we get from it, but don't actually have much leverage or understanding about those systems themselves.
Yeah, and Nick, the only thing I want to push back on about that is, you're right. We feed these things information and oftentimes intimate details of our lives, right? Like I use ChatGPT because I have chronic nasal congestion at
Hmm.
night.
Hmm.
And so I use that to come up with different strategies
Yeah,
for addressing that. And it's way better. But like, that's I fed it a bunch of information about like my habits
right.
and my house and
It makes it
all.
better, actually, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Go
But
ahead.
my only pushback to what you were sharing is it knows a lot about you, even if you personally don't feed it anything, right?
Hmm.
Like I can go to any large language model with access to the internet and say, write me a profile of Nick Janos, and it's going
Hmm.
to do it
Yes.
because you've written articles, you've written books, like we've written stuff together that's on the internet. There are probably videos of you that it has scraped, right? Like
Yeah.
it has some of that built in before you even interact with it.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally, I accept that pushback because I think the way I think about this is that if human beings collectively and individually begin to utilize AI systems, there is a fundamental asymmetry. These systems are also have way more knowledge than any one human being because they can access all of human knowledge that's been indexed for them faster than any of us can.
Right.
faster than you can type. And there's no human who knows everything about like little ants that live in this one little region of the Amazon, but also knows about, deep space, right? You
Right.
know what I mean? Like there's humans who know one or the other, but this thing has access to all this information. And so that asymmetry, it's an interesting way to start off a technology for the future is that you're already somewhat at a disadvantage in a game of power between what it can do and what we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great point. It's a good way to close out. So Nick, on our first movie night, I don't think we left the listeners with recommendations about should they watch this
Oh,
movie,
right.
should
Yeah.
they not. So let's put on our reviewer hats. I would say if you would like to get a window into how the lab leaders are thinking about the world and would also like to ruin one evening, this is a great film choice.
Yes. Yes. Those conditions both have to be met for you to sit down and watch this.
Yeah. No, like I said, I can appreciate that this is a great film and also know that I will absolutely never watch it again.
Yeah, but overall, we recommend it for those
Yeah.
reasons. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. You can find our writing on meltsintoair.org and on LinkedIn, Zach Justice and Nick Janos. Find these links and more in the show notes. If you have feedback or want to share an idea, email us at unfixed@meltsintoair.org. Thank you to Jamie Gunderson for producing and editing the show.